Welcome, netizens. So, here's the deal. I just watched Avengers Infinity War. I think it came out in like 2017 or something. Okay movie. Not a big fan of Marvel movies in general. But it raised an interesting question for me. And I'm just gonna preface this video right now. Not a math guy by any means. I can do calculus, that's all I need to know. But we're gonna do this because it's interesting. So, if you've seen Avengers Infinity War, which I'm assuming you have if you've watched this video and you're living in the year 2025, you've seen Avengers Infinity War. At the end of the movie, Thanos snaps his fingers and uses the power of the Infinity Stones to eviscerate 50% of all life in the universe. And when I say all life, I'm assuming that means humans and, sentient beings that are, equivalent to humans in a sci-fi fantasy way, right? That's just how it works, Thanos didn't snap his fingers and half of the forests on Earth were turned to dust. We didn't see that with cats and dogs and, bacteria or fungi or anything. We didn't see half of the fields be raised from the earth, all the crops. Did they mention the crops? I feel like maybe they did in Endgame. I don't even know. That's such a weird question, but it doesn't really matter because this is a statistics question. So, let's say that this is the universe. It's these four people, okay. Now, if you're Thanos and you snap your fingers and you want to wipe out half of this universe's population, you need a random process. You're an egalitarian. You want everything to be equal, rich and poor alike, right? So, you need an unbiased way to make sure that half of all life in this universe is gone so that the other half can thrive. And how are you gonna do that? Well, my first thought is something that we're gonna call process A. So this was my initial thought, which is everyone gets a coin, and you flip the coin. If it turns up heads, you survive. If it turns out tails, you're done, gone, reduced to atoms. So I don't have a coin on me, so we're gonna pretend that I'm a coin. I'm just gonna assign these randomly, okay? Heads, tails, and heads. That was random. See? This is interesting because if you're any one of these individuals, you obviously have a 50% chance of surviving the snap, right? Because you flip a coin, and assuming it's a fair coin, which I am, your odds are exactly 50-50, right? But it's interesting because even though you have a 50% chance of survival, not half of the universe is going to survive this. In this specific situation, 3 out of 4, 75% of the universe survived this. And this person died, but the rest of them survived. That's a 75% survival rate, which I don't think was Thanos' plan. He didn't say, let's leave it up to chance and maybe 75% of the universe will survive. No, he said we need to get rid of half of all life in the universe so that the other half can thrive. So, what I think is the canon answer to Thanos' methodology is what I'm going to call process B. Okay? So, in process B, it's very similar. What you're going to do is randomly assign each of these people a group, right? And since I love Greek letters so much, we're going to say you have group alpha, which is you survive. And then you have group beta, which means that you means you die, right? This is very nuanced because even though you have a 50% chance of being selected into any given group, right? Let's say the difference is that we know for a fact that at the end of this process, 50% of this population is going to survive and 50% is not going to survive. It's going to be exactly 50-50. We have 4 people. There is a 0% chance that this scenario happens. And, you know, if you're an individual, you still have a 50% chance, right? You know, there's a 50% chance you get selected into group alpha, a 50% chance you get selected into group beta. But the difference is that when you look at it on a systematic level and a proportional level, right? There's a 100% chance that at the end of the process, 50% of the population will remain, whereas that's not certain here. However, when you account for the law of large numbers and the fact that the universe is composed of trillions and trillions of, you know, sentient beings that are being included in this process, they're basically the same outcome, right? But I think it's an important distinction. And by the way, side tangent, this is almost definitely the canon process B. You know, again, I'm assuming you've seen Infinity War if you're watching this, but Thanos literally uses this process in the flashback on Gamora's planet, where, you know, when he conquered planets, he would come in with his army and he would take the population and line them up, 2 equally sized groups, and then he would order his men to fire upon one line. So that's this process. That's what happened. So I'm going to continue to refer to process A, but I'm going to erase it. But keep it in mind, because I will be coming back to it. But let's say we're on the planet Earth. Wow, what a beautiful planet. Would be a shame if something were to happen. Something's happening! You have, again, 4 people here. And then something crazy happens. You know, Thanos comes in and he says, we're using too many resources. The only way that we can prevent collapse on this planet is if we wipe out 50% of the population, which, by the way, insane idea, eco-fascist tendencies. I think that's pretty clear. I don't have to say more about that. If you agree with Thanos, check your worldview. He was not in the right. He was not spitting. Why can't you just double the resources? Anyway, there's so much discourse about that. We're gonna ignore it. Because this is a statistics class. All right, class. So let's assume again that the planet Earth is the only planet in the universe, or at least that's being included in this random process. Maybe Thanos isn't looking out to the rest of the universe right now. He's just talking about Earth. And then he initiates process B. He does the snap, and, everyone here is assigned to a group. Alpha, alpha, beta, beta. This is a random process. Doesn't discriminate. Rich and poor alike are equally likely to be in any one of these groups. And then, at the end of the day, boom, boom. One half dies so the other half can flourish, or whatever, But then, before Thanos puts process B into effect, actually, what happens? He says, hold on, if I have the power of all 6 Infinity Stones, why would I limit it to just the planet Earth? Why shouldn't I also include my home planet, Titan? And on the planet Titan, there are 4 more people. So, with these 2 planets in mind, Thanos initiates process B, okay? Alpha, alpha, beta, beta, alpha, alpha, beta, beta. 2 people on this planet are wiped. 2 people on this planet are wiped. But out of the entire universe, half of the population survives. We're good. Well, we're not good. He committed genocide. It's actually pretty bad. I've seen Attack on Titan. And also never mind. Let's not get political. I don't want to be the friend that's too woke. I'm already that friend. But, okay. So this is one possible scenario, right? But there are other possible scenarios. Like, let's say, for example, that this was the scenario that happened. On Earth, we only have 1 survivor. And on Titan, we have 3 out of 4 survivors. That's 25% here, 75% here. Overall, it's still 50-50, right? If the universe's population is 8, overall, 4 people survived and 4 people did not survive. However, it's also possible that the extreme happens. That planet Earth is completely wiped out, and planet Titan, nothing even happens, right? Thanos snaps his fingers and it's just like, it's another day. Gotta go to work, right? I'm a cockroach, but I gotta go to work. What was I saying? Yeah. Okay. So, what I'm saying is that if you restrict it to 1 planet, this scenario becomes impossible. right? Because you can't have a random process that occurs like process B and have the entire planet die, or even anything other than 50%. That's just impossible, right? It's a given about the process. But, once you start to include multiple planets in this, and it's also interesting because each planet is itself no planet is a closed system, but like they're all a lot more separated from each other than if you just like included a planet like itself, because like people aren't really, I mean, people like travel between planets in Marvel movies, but like not to the same extent, obviously, that it's like if I eliminated 70% of life on Earth, that like, the other 30% could repopulate it pretty easily. Not easily, but like it would happen. That wouldn't happen in this scenario. In this scenario, Earth isn't coming back. And Titan is just fine. So, I guess, what am I saying? One, this process is dumb, but also, you can draw a probability distribution where this is one extreme, where Earth is completely eliminated and Titan is completely eliminated. This is 4 out of 4 in group beta and 4 out of 4 in group alpha for Earth and Titan respectively. So that's one scenario. And then you have the scenario where, one person on Earth survives and one person on Titan dies. And then, that's one scenario here, so that's one. But when you think about it, each of these people can be counted individually, right? So there's actually 4 ways for that to happen, right? You got Jimmy and Bob and Michael and Peter. They're not all the same guy. You have to count them as individuals. So I don't even remember the names I just used, but there's 4 ways that this can go down on planet Earth. And then there's another 4 ways that it can go down on Titan. So that's 1 out of 4. There's 4 on Earth, and then there's 4 on Titan. Is that just 4 times 4? Is it 16? Or is it 4 to the 4? I don't know. Again, I prefaced this at the beginning. I'm not a math guy. I'm just going to go 16. And then that also happens, on the other side of the spectrum, where we can assume, I'm not going to redraw all the symbols, but we can assume that the planet Titan is all wiped out and the planet Earth survives completely. That's another end of the spectrum. That's 1. And then, 1 guy on Titan survives. 3 guys on Earth survive. That's another 16 on this side of the spectrum. And then there's, the most likely probability in this process, which is that, it's 50-50 on both planets. And is that 16 times 16? I don't know. Again, I'm not going to do the calculations right now. I don't give a shit. What's 16 times 16? Fuck, I'm going to get my calculator. I can't do math in my head. 256. Is that right? Are there 256 options? That doesn't sound right, but it might be right. I'm just gonna write it. 256. And so then the probability distribution looks super big, like that. Super narrow. And this is a very simple system, too. This is only 2 planets. And overall, Thanos is doing this to the whole universe. So, I guess what I'm saying, chat, is that overall, in the population of the universe, if we're assuming, and we are assuming, that Thanos is using Process B, to enact his, his plan or whatever. It's stupid, it's really dumb. But we're assuming that that's the case, that he's using this process. There's a 100% chance that, if you take the entire population of the universe, 50% will survive and 50% will be wiped out. He didn't use process A. But if he did, and there are trillions upon trillions of lives in the universe, each person flips a coin, it turns up heads or tails. I love Sonic. Just watched Sonic 3 last month. That was a great movie. What was I saying? Oh yeah. But in process A, since you have trillions of people flipping a coin, and that decides whether or not they live or survive, or they live or die, and since you have so many people doing that, eventually the distribution that you get of like people who survived and people who didn't, it's just gonna be 50%, right? Like, yeah, it'll be like some variance, but it's realistically gonna look like 50.0 with a lot of zeros after it, and maybe a 1 somewhere %, right? I'm not gonna do the math, but it's a lot. It's a lot of people flipping a coin. And realistically, like, you do that on Earth with 8 billion people here, or across the universe with trillions more, it's the same thing, right? It's 50%. So that's what it looks like on the macro level. So on the macro level, process A and B look exactly the same. But what's interesting is that you look at, for example, on the planet Titan, not the one that we just had here, but the actual planet in the movie, where, you had Tony Stark and Peter Parker and Doctor Strange and the Guardians, I think it was seven people on that planet, and then they were fighting Thanos, and, then he won, and he went back to Earth and snapped his fingers, and let me draw this out. You have the actual planet Titan. You have Tony Stark with. I was thinking about like actually drawing them out, like, ooh, Tony, he's got like the glasses and the goatee, but that's a lot of work. But then you have, I'm pretty sure it was 7. So, what was her name? 6. Oh, it's just like, it's kind of like, how in elementary school, you'd always see like the drawings of the Earth, and like all the kids have, they're holding their hands across. It's kind of like that, except it's not a happy ending. Because what happens is you have Tony Stark and he survives, but then Peter Parker doesn't feel so good, and Drax is like, I don't know, he's interesting. I like him, but then Peter Quill dies, and who else is there? Doctor Strange. He's like, it was the only way. And then who else was on the thing? Mantis dies too. And then, oh shit, I'm blanking on her name. Nebula. Yeah, Gamora's sister. But she survives. So that's 2 out of 7, which is about a 28 or something survival rate. Which is interesting. And I'm just wondering, where does this fall in the probability distribution? Like, obviously, we've established that the total population size matters. It matters a lot. But then we also established that because of the law of large numbers, you know, the difference between 8 billion and 7 trillion and, you know, 60 gajillion, it doesn't really matter. So, like, we can assume that there are infinite other people beyond this system, practically. Where does this fall? Is this calculus? There's probably some calculus involved in this answer. Because I guess what I just described is a limit that goes to infinity. Where X population approaches infinity. Yeah, something like that. I'm not going to do the math right here. I probably won't do the math in general, but maybe I'll post this online and then one of you smarter people can answer it for me. Because I don't know. That's an interesting question. Because, yeah, where does this fall on the probability distribution, this scenario? That's the real question. Because sure, you can flip a coin individually. I don't even know what I'm saying. It's almost 30 minutes, and I've been talking about this for so long, but I guess to wrap up, what are we talking about? We have two processes, A and B, which look similar but are meaningfully different in the fact that, you know, in process B, there's the same amount of coin flips, or are there? There's one actual coin flip, which is just which group dies and which group lives. And then how you're assigned into that group is also random. It's also a coin flip. Except it's not actually a coin flip, because if it were a coin flip, then it would be the same thing as scenario A, as process A. Right? Yeah, it would be. Because then you would have an uneven distribution that's only evened out by the law of large numbers. But it's not that. It's necessarily a perfectly split groups, you know, unless you have an odd number, but then it's just one off, which the significance of that gets lower as you include bigger populations. So that doesn't really matter, but that's a side tangent. It's a meaningful difference, and I'm curious. So I guess my final question is, what even is my final question? What was the probability of the 2 out of 7 scenario that we saw on Titan? Like, where does that fall on the probability distribution that I postulated? Signing off.